Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Working Process. I'm speaking with Kristen Stain today about coil building, their community offerings, ancestral knowing, reverence for the earth, how their vessels extend the face jug tradition, their broader creative practice, and of course, so much more. So I hope that you enjoy this one, and here we go. Welcome to Working Process, conversations with Black women working in, with, and around clay about their work and process. An audio offering by writer and ceramicist Gabrielle Ione Hickmon. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Working Process. I am here today with Kristen Stain, another Black woman ceramicist who I first came across her work on Instagram through her Black clay classes. And I was like, I want to go. This is such a cool offering, but it's in Oakland and I live in Michigan. So I figured getting together and chatting on Zoom about her work would be a start until I can get out to the Bay Area. So Kristen, thank you so much for joining me. I'd love for you to tell folks a little bit about yourself before we dive into the conversation.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Kristen Stain. I'm from Fresno, California. I have a background in drawing and painting, and I discovered ceramics in 2019 and have experienced a lot of shifts in my life since, and that's kind of what I'm doing full time, making work and selling work and sharing with others. So, yeah.
Yay, I'm so excited that you're here. To start us off, I'd love to hear what your favorite clay body glaze and then like tool is. Like, what are you always sort of reaching for when you're working?
Yeah. So my favorite clay body is probably charcoal. It's a black, almost black clay body by Aardvark. I've recently started getting into red velvet, which is like a deep red-brown color as well. And then my favorite glaze, or my most used glaze, is Saturation Gold by Amico. And my favorite tool, it might be the serrated rib, because I'm coil building. And then I was able to sit in on a artist in residence demo when I lived in Boston, and she did beautiful carvings. And so now I have these metal wax carving tools, which are great for sculpting. So, yeah.
Those sound really cool, especially the metal wax tools. I also love a serrated rib because I also coil build. So I feel like that's, we're using that all the time.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have used the glaze that you mentioned before as well. And is it on the vessels that are behind you? Are folks like being able to see these clays? And I love that. Amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm also curious, like what sound, right? Like when I'm in the studio, I'm always sort of listening to like a playlist or like a podcast, depending upon like where I'm at in the process of making something. And so I'm curious, like, what sound someone might always or like often hear when you're in your studio, if they were to like pop by while you were making.
Yeah. I guess it kind of shifts from time to time. I listen to a lot of like Afro beat, some current, some like Fela Kuti and other things that the algorithm kind of brings me. And then sometimes I like to like put on a documentary, like specifically like it's usually like a Black history related documentary. Like I watch like a Billie Holiday one or Nina Simone. And I'm mostly just listening, but just kind of like taking in some new nuggets while I work feels nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And sort of like making your like Black sound in your space
Exactly.
is what I'm taking away from that answer. And I really love that. So can you tell us like a little bit more about your working process? Like you've mentioned that you coil build. and part of the reason as well why I wanted to talk to you is because your work is so clearly like thinking in the face jug tradition. And we're going to talk about some of this a little bit more, but do you like make all your coils before you start? Are you like doing like a pinch pot base and then coiling up? Like just kind of, like how are you, what's your working process?
Yeah, so I typically start with like a slab as the base of my piece, and usually cut like a circular kind of shape out of that. And then I go straight into coils. I do not make my coils beforehand. I typically will have like maybe cut up some clay from the bag and I have it like off to the side. Um, I know some coil builders like make really neat, perfect like snakes. I kind of just squeeze up and go. And I feel like when I'm in the process of like joining the coils, that's when I kind of even out the thickness of my pieces. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's always so interesting to hear about how people are, actually making their work because, you and I both coil build, right? But like we're doing it in different ways. And that's so specific to both like sort of maybe like what we've learned or how we were taught, but also like sort of who we are and how our hands sit with the clay. But I also usually like have, a circular slab, but I like to make my coils, like roll my sinks out. They're not perfect by any means, but I like to have them out so that I can kind of like not work quickly is not the word, but like I'm usually working on, like two pieces at a time. And so like having the coils rolled makes like the process of sort of moving between the two a bit more fluid. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, totally.
I was just curious. So okay, let's dive into it. I want to hear about when you first came to clay, right? You mentioned, your background in drawing and painting as well. So like when did you first sort of start working with clay? And then at what point, maybe it was 2019, like you mentioned, but then at what point, right, did you sort of know that like clay was a material that you were like committed to in your practice?
Yeah, so I, in 2019, I was living in New York and I was working as a corporate designer in the footwear and apparel industry. And I was struggling a lot, not only from like a cultural standpoint, but just like my daily life. I was struggling with like sitting at a desk and like being at the computer for most of the day. And I was starting to get back into my drawing practice, like kind of create like side projects for myself so that I could be creative outside of work. And it's so interesting because I had never taken like a pottery class in school or anything like that. I had maybe gone to like Color Me Mine a few times when I was little to like paint a plate or a seahorse or whatever. But I decided to do a one-day wheel throwing workshop and I went by myself. And I had a blast. And so I decided to sign up for a second one-day wheel throwing workshop and I took some friends with me. And then January 2020 was when I signed up for my first like 14-week full like ceramics 1 course. And as you can imagine, my class was interrupted by the lockdown. I ended up moving to Boston while I was still working remotely. But I had already caught the clay bug. I really didn't know anything at all. Like, I don't know, I kind of cringe when I look back at like just my, it's great, like my experimentation and like the questions that I was having, especially being a person who has like a background in drawing and painting, and like moving from 2D to 3D. But Yeah, I think like a few months into living in Boston, I started looking at ceramic studios out there, and obviously a lot of businesses were trying to figure out how to navigate the lockdown. And so I found a studio that was like selling clay that you could take home and then bring it back, of course masked up, and like drop it off to get fired. And so I started doing that in the fall of 2020. I ended up quitting my job, and I started working freelance as an illustrator and designer. Um, and I really just had like a lot of time open up, and yeah, I was like inquiring about like getting an MFA, and I studied illustration and design like in school, and so that was my um, like reference point as far as like being an artist. And it's like I have to study it now because I like it and I care about it, and that just felt so that felt really aspirational. And so yeah, I just decided to commit myself to it on my own.
Yeah, I love that journey. One, like, congratulations on quitting your job and taking the leap, right, and making it work. I've never had the corporate gig because I just never felt like it like vibed with um who, like, what I wanted for my life. So I really admire people, right, who either leave or just never sort of do it in the first place, um, and then figure out how to make it work. But I also love what you were saying about sort of just like committing yourself to clay, right? Like sort of catching the bug and committing to like teaching yourself or finding other ways to learn outside of an MFA program. That really resonates with like me and the journey that I've had through clay as well, because I think the beautiful thing about it is that it's so intuitive. And while it can be very like particular, it can also be very like forgiving.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's really, really nice about the material. Like, I think it definitely is a medium that you can like teach yourself, maybe in ways that you might need instruction in some other ones.
Yeah, I agree. I believe, and I guess I believe this about most art forms, but I think that there's no alternative or like better way to get better than just like spending time with the material. And I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
is like the greatest um, like advantage that I've had, is that I've just like spent so much time. It's been a short amount of time, but like when I made the decision to commit myself to it, it was like that was my like Monday through Saturday situation. Like I just spent time with the material, and that taught me so much. So
Yeah. Yeah. I keep saying this in episodes, but it's like we learn the clay and the clay also learns us as well. And then we're able to collaborate and like, bring things to life. But I know that, right? So part of what you're bringing to life is these explorations of your cultural heritage. And so I'd love to hear how, right, like having roots in West Africa and the Caribbean, being a Black American, I know you were like, um, born in Pittsburgh, grew up in Fresno, but then you're also talking about like New York and Boston, and now you live in Oakland. Like, yeah, just like how does like who you are and your heritage influence your practice and your work?
yeah, so my paternal grandmother was a Haitian immigrant, and I really didn't grow up like super connected to Haitian culture, um, but I have a very big Black family, and a lot of them are in Fresno, as well as like South Central Los Angeles. I grew up going to Dallas, Texas for like Thanksgiving every year. And living in Fresno, I was actually like very isolated. Like I grew up in a lot of like white spaces, but there was so much like pride and dignity at home. And so I have always, just been interested in Black history. My maternal grandfather, was a pastor and like marched with Dr. King when he came to California. So like all of those stories have, been instilled in me from like a really young age. And I think, and I was also very close to my paternal Haitian grandmother, and was very interested in like learning more about our culture. And so I've kind of just like taken those things upon myself to learn more. I've like taken like Haitian Creole classes because I didn't grow up like speaking the language. And when I did my first 2 years of college at the University of Pittsburgh, and I originally declared like political science major. So I like loved history and sociology, and I took some Africana studies classes. But yeah, I mean, I think my interest in like information and also just wanting to understand myself, especially because I was at PWIs and just like, I mean, I think it's in some ways like very like selfish. It's like I just want to know me and want to like ground myself in who I am and like feel proud of it and be able to say like, this is, these are the things, this is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's selfish at all, though, because I think, right, like you learning that about yourself and then putting that into your work, and also through the education that you do, like through the Black clay classes, which, we're going to talk about, like creates portals for other people to learn about themselves or to experience like your experience and like your sort of specific Black experience, but also like Black culture largely. So I don't think it's selfish at all. So kind of continuing in this vein of like heritage, right? I would love to hear, as we've established, like we both coil build. And so I would love to hear your thoughts about like coil building as an ancestral practice and as like a portal to ancestral knowing and like collective memory. Cause I have thoughts as well, but like, I want to hear, I want to hear about that.
Yeah. I mean, I do think so much about like my lineage and like some of this like researching and studying, like it's, I've like traveled back through, my own personal lens. It's like, okay, so my paternal grandmother is from Haiti. And like when you look at Haitian culture and even like the language, you know that like Haitian Creole is a mix of, Yoruba and Arawak and French and some Spanish. And so then I go, then I'm in Yoruba land and like what's happening there. I also think like I recently came across this language around like active meditation and like, I think, coil building is something that's been done for such a long time. And, I don't know I don't have any way of knowing that like someone way back in my lineage also did this, but like, there is like a grounding in that practice and like, I also feel like, I don't know, it maybe doesn't even have to be coil building. It could like, I don't know if you feel this way too, but I've noticed that like small, repetitive, like actions, like for me really trigger like deep, like philosophical and like, just like greater knowledge somehow. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question in a good way,
No,
but
I mean,
yeah.
no, yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely agree with you about like small repetitive actions. I love this concept of like active meditation, which I haven't heard before. So thank you for like sharing that with me. I'm definitely going to go and look it up. And, I can find that in the studio, and I can also find that like when I'm cooking, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I think also your point about sort of not knowing, with certainty of someone in like your lineage, like maybe directly was also working with clay. I think I feel very similarly, but I think that also like we're also a part of like this larger, right, sort of Black lineage. And
Mm-hmm.
so even if it wasn't like, even if we can't know, this ancestor was also a ceramicist, like we're also
Yeah.
a part of like the larger sort of Black human family. And we know that, we know we've been doing this, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I also take a lot of comfort in like situating myself in sort of the longer and like larger um, lineage of Black folks, and especially like Black women who have worked with this material, like, from time immemorial.
Yeah. Yeah.
um okay, so extending the question, right, like how do ancestral traditions inform your practice, and specifically like sort of how you're combining those with your design industry experience, because I know that something that's really interesting to you, or like a concept that you explore in your work, is like both and so I'm curious how ancestral traditions show up, but also like your design experience sort of shows up in your work. And this maybe also leads us like right into thinking about like the face drug tradition as well. If you want to sort of speak to any of sort of those things that I've like dropped in your lap there.
Yeah. Well, I would say that like um, my practice is both intuitive and like informed by research.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say around the same time that I caught the clay bug, I also had like a big like spiritual opening. My maternal grandmother passed away, and yeah, I mean, I think I have always like understood the idea of like having ancestors, but like her passing just kind of like put that at the forefront for me. Um,
Yeah.
and like feeling really connected to her even as she transitioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started like looking into, I mean, I grew up in the Christian church, and like
Yeah.
I but I started kind of opening myself up to understanding like Black spirituality just like as a whole. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I started learning about ancestor veneration and like the all of the branches of Ifa, um, and so like that sort of informs like what I'm making, or like what
Mm.
um like where my heart space and my like mental space is when I'm making things. um and then I guess like as far as like being a designer or someone who like thinks about like making collections or sets of things, like that comes into play a little bit.
Yeah.
And I also think like on the design side, like the way that I was um, trained to like build a practice is also, it also feels kind of connected to like my past as like an athlete. You sort of like, there's like certain drills you do over and over again, or there's certain like ways of like training yourself. So like in the beginning I was making like the same thing over and over again, and like that was my way of like practicing like, oh, I know how to put up like a slab cylinder, or like I'm like learning how to sculpt a nose and mouths.
Yeah.
Like, I'm feeling more comfortable with it. And like, you know, now that I'm teaching, it's like I can have my piece facing you and like, you know, have my hand around. And because I'm so comfortable, I've done it so many times at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would say like the things that I'm focused on making right now are, yeah, I mean, it's all like based in ritual, and like that's pretty open, because there's so many, you know, we all have like our own like specific rituals.
Yeah.
But like, you know, making things that can like sit on someone's altar, or like, you know, if they are someone who has ritual around like making coffee or cooking, then like that can sit in that space. Or if they're like burning things, you know, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I love the point about conditioning, because that's true with anything, right? That you want to be um, good at, and good is different for everybody, but like
Mm-hmm.
getting to a place of comfort with it, like you have to condition, you have to train. And so I love that you like bring that up. But I kind of want to go back to what you were initially talking about and then where you ended, right around sort of like work rooted in ritual, exploring like African spirituality, because we can see like even examples of that in the vessels that you have like behind you, right, the candlesticks especially.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wonder if you can like elaborate a little bit more on that, because I love, right, so a lot of people talk about making work for like ritual. I think often in society, like we feel like a ritual, or maybe there's levels to what ritual is, right? And like I'm thinking about, I don't know if you know Molly Domo Patrice Somme's work, like the healing wisdom of Africa, right? And so the way that he breaks down like what ritual is different from sometimes how we talk about it in like larger society. So I really appreciated that text. But I think what I'm taking with me, and also just from like seeing your work, is how um, the ritual objects that you're creating are so clearly Black. They're so clearly, right, drawing from, you know, African American, Caribbean, West African histories, ideas about, you know, what is sacred. And I just wonder if you can like sort of elaborate a little bit more about that. And maybe the question is like, how do you see your work sort of in relation to or in conversation with these traditions, but also like you're really sort of extending them and like bringing them into the present for folks as well.
Okay, I think I understand your question. I think I do.
I can try to rephrase, but just if you could elaborate on how, right, like African spirituality, ritual, and sort of craft or making traditions, like how you're carrying those forward in your work.
Yeah, I think what I'm hoping, I mean, yeah, the hope for my work is that like it will, I am making work to be used, not to just, I mean, you know, people have different relationships with like their altar or their ritual spaces, but sorry.
No, you're fine. Take your time.
Huh.
Like if someone, right, buys your work
Mm-hmm.
and it's clearly coming from such a sort of spiritual and sacred place for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? What are you hoping is like transmuted or that they can like carry with them into their everyday when someone encounters and like, you know, buys and uses their work and has your work like in your space?
Yeah, I think like if someone is, you know, someone may purchase a piece of mine and it sits, you know, in a special place because they're buying it as like artwork and like a beautiful object. Um, I hope that it is like, I mean, especially if it is another Black person buying the piece, like that it is affirming like their beauty and their divinity, like their like inherent, like it's their right, you know. I hope that um, seeing it every day will at some point inspire them to like look deeper into something for themselves. Um, you know, I would hope that like maybe if they came across multiple pieces of mine, there might be one in particular that like strikes a chord with them because the nose looks like, you know, their grandmother's nose or something. And, you know, they can place that in its appropriate space and use it on a regular basis and like attach, you know, more meaning to it for themselves. Um, yeah. And I think, you know, there may be pieces that I make that are for, you know, when people gather around and like it becomes like a central part of, you know, a gathering ritual of some kind. I mean, it could be just a large, you know, bowl that has the snacks in it or something, you know. Um, but, you know, creating those like memories around kinship and like being together and loving on each other. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And are you drawing and sculpting the like noses and mouths and the faces essentially from like memories from photos? Is it totally intuitive? Like are like how are they like where are they coming from?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that like it's pretty intuitive. I like there's only been a couple of vessels that I have like drawn beforehand and then like attempted to like sculpt my drawing.
Yeah.
I think like more recently there are like a handful of vessels that I've like sketched out and I'm pretty certain that those are things that I want to see come to life. But I feel it almost feels like these people just sort of come through, you know,
Yeah.
like you know, I have like my way of like making a nose and a mouth, but like when it actually comes to like me putting those pieces on, like I find the nose and I find their mouth after the fact. So it kind of like they tell me who they are.
I love that. I love that so much because that feels like that means that your channel is open, right? Like for receiving sort of from the other side or the spirit world or the ancestors, or, you know, like whatever you want to call it. And have you had people tell you like this piece looks like some like have you ever had that happen where, you know, someone is
Yeah, which is very cool. I mean, you know, I don't always get to be there when people like, you know, make a purchase, but there have been a couple of times where like, you know, it's like there's four little guys sitting in front of me and someone's like, I I have to have this one, you know, and
Yeah.
that feels really cool.
I love that. I love that so much. And I don't know if you would be open to talking about it, and it's fine if you're not, but I'm curious if there are any particular practices that you engage in to keep your to keep your channel clear.
I mean, I still feel like such a baby in that space, but you know, I have learned from you know a priestess like how to take care of my ancestor altar,
Yeah.
and so that is
Yeah.
like my number one priority at this time.
Yeah.
And yeah, my partner and I, we are like really dedicated to that. And like, you know, it's like I make them coffee. Like if
Mm-hmm.
we make something good, like we're taking it to the altar as well. Like when we have people over and like have drinks, it goes on the altar as well, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would say that that is like the main thing. I also think like just like getting better at like taking care of myself in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like working out is important, and sleeping, and like eating well, and going to therapy, and you know all of those
Yeah.
things feel important too. I do feel like soon I may be like, you know, moving into a next chapter of like, you know, what else is like my hygiene around those things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. I just asked because so much of what you're saying really resonates with me. Like I also have an altar, and um, leave and give offerings, and go to I go to the cemetery a couple times a year and like tend to folks' graves and things like that. So I was just curious because it was just really resonating with me. And something that I think about a lot is like we make vessels, but we're vessels too. And so in the same way that like we tend to our material or our studio space or other, sort of other things that we're using when we're making, like tending to ourselves is also part of the work. So thank you for sharing that. You gotta folks have got to tap in.
Yeah.
Folks have got to tap in. But I want to also make sure we talk about the black clay offering that you have, because I just think that this is such a beautiful, like a beautiful gift, a beautiful offering. And I'm like truly plotting on, I don't know when I'm next going to be in California, but I'm truly plotting on like pulling up to a class. Right. And so one, I just like want to hear about how they came about. And I'm also just curious about like what has been like the best part of like sort of working with clay in community, especially because this like lone studio potter working by themselves is like so one like Western and so new. And so I also am just imagining that like the energy in your classes is so beautiful. So yeah, I just would love to hear about like how they came about, and just like yeah, like what's the vibe? What do you love about doing it?
Yeah. I gosh, it was last year. I was still living in Fresno, but spending a ton of time in Oakland. I was uh, dating my partner, visiting friends all the time. I had actually been offered um, a 6 week teaching position up here, and so I was like couch surfing and stuff. Um, and yeah, I had a conversation with my partner just about my experience, like I guess like my educational experience as a whole, but like more specifically like my art education, which has been a very isolating one. very isolating. And I was also like reflecting on how few Black teachers I've had outside of like the obvious, like my family member, you know, my aunties, my grandma, my mom, dad. Yeah, there's been so few times where I've been in the classroom and the person like facilitating has been a Black person. And my partner is the person who encouraged me to offer this class. And it was supposed to be a one-time, like, sweet thing to do. And the first class sold out in like a day. And like, so I had to come up with another, like a second date. And then that one sold out. And, yeah, and then I needed to find like a regular location to have this. And I think for the first or second one, I think I raised like, you know, like $700 or something so that everything would be paid for appropriately and so that people could come to the class for free. And yeah, what's the vibe? I mean, so I grew up with like the greatest hostess ever, my mom. And like, yeah, so it's really important to me, like if I invite people into a space for it to feel comfortable and like to give people my best. And so like every class I try to bring like wine and non-alcoholic beverages and snacks and water. And I've like made playlists. And like the first thing that we do is like introduce ourselves. And I always have like a food prompt because I feel like that is such a huge one. Like food culture is like, that's also a ritual. And it's such an important part of like the African diaspora. And it's like a really nice way for, I mean, I guess it's like an icebreaker, but it is like a really, it really is like such a good way to bring us all together. There's usually so much like commonality in like what we all share with each other in that first like 10 minutes. And it like completely like, I mean, I think people already come into this space like excited and open, but like any like little lingering whatever, like people are disarmed and feel like, oh, like, yeah, you're like, and yeah, I spend a little bit of time like doing a demo, and like I try to share a little bit about my experience and like just why we're in the space. I mean, and that's because, like you said earlier, like we've been doing this, and like we deserve to explore and like be creative and be comfortable and feel joyous and be able to share. And yeah, it's really, really fun. Like there's a lot of like laughter, people talk, you know, it's like I just like facilitate like what happens. Like I show them a couple of things, and then like it's just 3 hours of fun, basically.
Yeah. So folks make a piece in the class and then you fire them and then they get to pick them up. Is there also like glazing? It's just like the one sort of 3-hour session?
Yeah, it's just the one 3-hour session. I did a 2-part once, which was great. I do think that there is like interest and desire to like be able to meet more than once. Like, and so we'll see how things like develop. Yeah, I've also just like considered like what it would look like to just have like studio, like black clay studio hours, so that like people can just come. It's not about like teaching or necessarily learning, but just like being in the space and like getting to enjoy each other, and like share ideas. So yeah.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. And I just can tell from, whenever you post anything about it, I just can tell that like the energy in the space is so lovely. And I don't know, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, take this on tour. Like, I want to see it like all across.
I really do. I do. I want to.
Yeah.
I want to.
Yeah.
Go to Atlanta and Detroit and
listen, Detroit. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. But we have spoken it into existence.
Yep.
And so now it's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like the ancestors will take care of it.
Yes.
We don't even have to do too much. So as we sort of like wind down, I would love to just kind of hear like sort of what your clay practice has like taught you about like life, about the world, about art, and also, right, knowing that ceramics have such longevity, like as a material, right? Like when someone sees your work, 100 years from now, like what do you hope that they take with them? Like what do you hope that your work kind of contributes or like leaves behind?
Yeah. Can you say the first part again for me, actually?
Yeah. What has your clay practice taught you about like yourself, about world, about art?
Yeah. I have like learned to be better at like accepting like failure. And also just and like being comfortable with it. Yeah. And I think simultaneously, like as I have come through my like clay journey, like I also experienced like what felt like failures outside of like clay, and like yeah, just like that it's an opportunity for lesson and growth and rebirth and something better and new to come. I also think something that like, this is a little bit of a tangent, but when I first started at a studio in Boston, there were like only 3 clay bodies, and they were all like relatively light colored. And when I got back to California, I was able to use the dark clay body, and a lot of the people in the studio would say things like, oh, that clay is so beautiful, but it's really difficult to work with, which is very, very, very interesting. But yeah, just like spending time and like taking the time to like actually learn this, like, person, the clay body, like getting to actually like build a relationship with it. I think maybe the lesson is like patience and like being able to like grow slow, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess like, I guess I haven't thought so much about like I don't know, an archaeologist, like discovering my ceramics. But I do like want to, I guess what I want is to like create like heirlooms or like things that have, you know, like sweet memories.
Yeah.
I have like a piece of art. My paternal grandmother loved art. She didn't want me to be an artist, but she loved art so much, and she was like the first person that I knew personally that had an art collection. And
Mm.
I like have a small piece of her artwork, and it's like so special to me. And I, you know, like
Yeah.
I think, um, you know, and I have like her beret, and I have, you know, like, or I have my other grandmother's like some of her jewelry and stuff. And like, I think I want to make things that kind of have that same sensation of like, yeah, just something special that you like grew up seeing in the house, or, you know, like I took one of my dad's coffee mugs because it was, you know, it was something that I remember from my childhood. And
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's the vibe I'm trying to give. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that because we're also going to be ancestors one day, right? And so
mhm.
carrying things forward for our descendants and like creating things for other people
Yeah.
to sort of give or extend to their descendants is such a beautiful thing to do with your practice. And also this point about, again, like, you know, slow growth, building a relationship with the material, um, really just resonates with me as well. But I'm just really struck by just the attention to like ancestors and descendants in your work, and I think that that's really really beautiful. So thank you for sharing. Outside of like sort of your clay and your studio practice, what are you like reading, listening to, like watching, enjoying right now?
Hmm. I uh with having a new ancestor in Nikki Giovanni. I've
Mm-hmm.
read a couple of her books, and I think a few months ago I bought A Good Cry, which I've read a couple of the poems from there, but that is something that I'm going to be going back to. Um, yeah, I love her work, and she's a fellow Gemini, so I just love her extra.
Mm.
Um, and what am I watching? I'm not gonna lie, I love watching TV, and yeah, and I'm really good for binging just random stuff. I just watched The Madness, which was really interesting and
Mm.
stressful, and then I am. I just started Lost, which I never watched,
Okay,
so I'm watching that.
you're in for a ride.
Yeah,
You are in for a ride.
yeah,
But it's a good one. Like, you know,
yeah.
you'll sit with that for a good chunk of time, and that'll be like a
Mm-hmm.
nice anchor. And you know, I'm speaking of Nikki Giovanni. Like, may she absolutely rest in peace and power. And I hope that she I don't know. I just feel like she's with Mars now, and I know that that is making her really happy. And I, you know, hope she writes to us from there if she wants to. But also, like, if she doesn't, you know, she's given us so much. Um, but my last question is just like, what do you have coming up that you'd like to share with um, listeners, and then also like where can folks find out more about your work and your offerings?
Yeah. So the next thing that I have coming up We didn't talk about this earlier, but I am a part of a all-Black design cooperative called Aroko. And I mean, we haven't announced it yet, but in February, we will be having a pop-up here in Oakland. More details on that soon. You can find me at Ketchup Stain on Instagram. My website is ketchupstain.xyz. I am in the process of scheduling all of my Black clays for 2025. And yeah, I am plotting on some kind of show in the end of the year, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet.
Period. No, we only talk about what we're ready to talk about 100%. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and for chatting with me and for sharing with us about your practice. I've so enjoyed this conversation, and I know that everyone listening will enjoy it too.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. I really appreciate you seeing me.
Of course. It's an honor to see and be seen, and especially by other Black folks. So I'm really glad that we were able to do this. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to Working Process on your favorite listening platform and find us on Substack for transcripts, photos of guest work, and other offerings.